There is a quiet kind of disappointment that many people carry. It happens when you think you should be doing better by now. You thought that by this point, the memories would hurt less. The difficult days would come less often. You imagined waking up one morning and realizing that everything had finally fallen into place. Instead, you find yourself revisiting feelings you believed you had already left behind. And that can be discouraging. If that has been your experience lately, I want to begin by saying something that perhaps you have not heard often enough. Healing is not a straight line. It has never promised to be. For a little while tonight, maybe we can set aside the idea that healing should look graceful. Maybe we can let go of the expectation that becoming well always happens in neat, predictable steps. You do not have to impress anyone here. You do not have to explain why today felt heavier than yesterday. You are simply welcome to rest. Imagine standing beside the ocean. The waves arrive one after another. Some are gentle enough to barely touch your feet. Others rush in with surprising strength. You would never expect every wave to reach the shore with exactly the same rhythm. Healing often moves in much the same way. Some days you feel lighter. Other days an old memory appears without warning. And suddenly it feels as though you have traveled backwards. But perhaps you have not gone backwards at all. Perhaps you are simply meeting an old wound with a newer version of yourself. There is an important difference. Many psychologists describe healing as something that is non-linear. In other words, progress often includes moments of moving forward, slowing down, and occasionally feeling as though nothing has changed. Those difficult days are not proof that healing has failed. They are often part of the process itself. We rarely talk about this. Instead, we celebrate transformation. We admire before and after stories. We enjoy hearing about the day someone's life completely changed. But real life is usually much quieter. Healing often happens in ordinary moments. Choosing to get out of bed even when sadness feels heavy. Answering a phone call after weeks of wanting to hide. Laughing unexpectedly. Making yourself a warm cup of tea. Allowing yourself to cry instead of pretending you are fine. None of these moments would look extraordinary to someone passing by. Yet together, they become the gentle threads that slowly stitch a heart back together. Sometimes we mistake calm for healing. But healing is not always calm. Sometimes it is confusing. Sometimes it feels like grieving the same loss more than once. Sometimes it looks like forgiving someone one day and feeling angry again the next. Sometimes it is learning to trust after being hurt, only to become frightened when someone gets too close. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human. There is a common misunderstanding that once we heal from something, we should never feel pain about it again. But think about a scar. A scar means the wound has closed. Yet on certain days, perhaps when the weather changes or when it is touched unexpectedly, you may still notice that it exists. The scar is not evidence that the body failed to heal. It is evidence that healing happened after something difficult. Our emotional lives can be similar. Certain places, certain songs, certain dates on the calendar, a familiar perfume, a particular street. These things can quietly unlock memories we were not expecting. That does not mean you are starting over. It simply means your heart remembers. And hearts are allowed to remember. Perhaps one of the hardest parts of healing is how invisible it is. If you break your arm, people can see the cast. They understand why certain things are difficult. But emotional healing often happens where no one else can see it. People may assume you are fine because you smiled today. They may not realize that smiling required far more energy than they could imagine. There are battles that leave no visible marks. There are victories that receive no applause. You know them, even if no one else does. Maybe tonight is one of those nights when you feel exhausted by carrying something that nobody else notices. If so, I hope you can offer yourself the same kindness you would give a close friend. You probably would not tell someone you love that they should heal faster. You would not become frustrated because they had a difficult day after several good weeks. You would remind them that difficult moments do not erase the progress they have already made. Perhaps you deserve that same compassion. There is something else I would like you to remember. Healing is not about becoming the person you were before life became difficult. Sometimes we quietly wish we could go back to feeling carefree, back to trusting easily, back to the version of ourselves that existed before loss, disappointment, heartbreak, or fear. But healing is rarely a journey backward. It is often the gentle work of becoming someone new, someone who has known pain and still chooses kindness, someone who has experienced uncertainty and still finds reasons to hope, someone who understands that strength is often quiet, like roots growing beneath the earth where no one can see them. There is an old tree in many forests that survives fierce storms, not because it never bends, but because its roots have learned how to hold steady through changing seasons. People are not so different. The difficult seasons of your life may have been growing roots you cannot yet see, not because pain is something to be celebrated, but because surviving it often leaves behind a depth that comfort alone could never teach. And maybe that depth is already beginning to shape you in gentle ways. You may listen more carefully now. You may notice when someone else is hurting. You may appreciate peaceful moments that once seemed ordinary. These changes are easy to overlook, yet they matter. Perhaps healing is less about returning to who you were and more about discovering who you are becoming. If tonight feels messy, if your emotions seem tangled, if your progress feels slower than you hoped, please remember this. Messy does not mean broken. Slow does not mean failing. And difficult does not mean impossible. Sometimes the most meaningful growth happens quietly, beneath the surface, long before anyone can see it, including you. There is another part of healing that rarely gets talked about. Sometimes, the hardest person to be patient with is ourselves. We can offer endless understanding to the people we love. We tell them that recovery takes time. We remind them that difficult days are normal. We encourage them to rest when they are tired. But when it comes to our own hearts, the conversation changes. We ask ourselves why we are still struggling. why certain memories still sting, why some mornings still feel heavier than others, as though healing should follow a schedule, as though our hearts should know what the calendar says. The truth is, our emotional lives do not measure time the way clocks do. A memory can feel distant for months, then suddenly become vivid because of a familiar song, a familiar smell, or an ordinary Tuesday that reminds us of something we thought we had forgotten. That does not mean you have lost your progress. It simply means your heart is still making sense of what happened. And maybe that is all right. Imagine walking through a garden in early spring. At first glance, it might seem as though nothing is growing. The branches are bare. The ground still looks quiet. The air is cool, but beneath the surface, roots are already awake. There is movement that no one can see. Healing often feels like that. Some of your most important changes are happening where your own eyes cannot easily notice them. Perhaps you have become gentler with yourself. Perhaps you leave situations that once drained all your energy. Perhaps you no longer apologize for needing rest. Perhaps you have learned that saying no is sometimes another way of saying yes to your own well-being. These changes rarely arrive with celebration. They simply become part of who you are. There is something beautiful about quiet progress. It does not ask for attention. It simply keeps unfolding. We live in a world that often measures success by what can be seen. The promotion, the new relationship, the finished project, the perfectly edited photograph. But some of life's greatest victories happen entirely within us. Choosing not to send the angry message. Taking a deep breath before reacting. Allowing yourself to cry instead of pretending to be fine. Trusting someone again after disappointment. Believing that tomorrow deserves another chance. These moments may never receive applause. Still, they deserve to be honored. Sometimes I think healing is less like climbing a mountain and more like learning to walk through changing weather. Some days the sky is clear. Some days it rains. Some days the wind feels stronger than expected. You cannot control every season, but little by little, you learn that you are capable of walking through all of them. Not perfectly, simply steadily. And perhaps that has always been enough. If tonight feels heavy, you do not have to carry tomorrow as well. Let tonight belong to tonight. The unanswered questions can rest until morning. The decisions can wait. Your heart has carried enough for one day. As you listen, notice the quiet around you. Perhaps there is the gentle hum of a fan, the distant sound of traffic becoming softer, the rhythm of your own breathing. These ordinary sounds remind us of something simple. Life continues gently, even when our minds become busy. There is comfort in ordinary things. The warmth of a blanket, the cool side of a pillow, a favorite mug waiting in the kitchen tomorrow morning. The first light that will eventually find its way through the window. These small moments are easy to overlook, yet they quietly remind us that life is made of far more than our hardest days. And maybe healing is not about reaching a finish line. Maybe it is about slowly collecting enough peaceful moments that they begin to outweigh the painful ones. Not because the past disappears, but because your life continues to grow around it, like a tree that grows year after year around an old scar in its trunk. The scar remains. The tree keeps reaching toward the light anyway. Perhaps you are doing the same, whether you notice it or not. So tonight, if your healing feels untidy, if it feels slower than you hoped, if you have cried over something you thought you had already overcome, please don't mistake that for failure. Your heart is not falling apart. It is finding its own way forward. One quiet breath, one ordinary day, one gentle choice at a time. That kind of healing may never look perfect, but it is real, and it is enough. As this day comes to a close, I hope you allow yourself one small kindness before you fall asleep. Speak to yourself with the same softness you would offer someone you deeply love. You have carried more than anyone else fully knows. You have survived days you once thought would break you. And somehow, here you are, still learning, still growing, still choosing to begin again. That is something to be proud of, even if no one else sees it. Thank you for spending these quiet moments here. May your mind become a little lighter. May your shoulders soften. May tomorrow ask a little less of you than today did. And if it doesn't, I hope you remember that you don't have to carry it all at once. For now, simply rest. Wherever you are right now, I'm glad you made it here. Thank you for listening, liking, and commenting. Please share Soul Planet with someone who you think may need it.